Hello, I'm Lindley Gooden. Welcome to our webinar, Designing a Resilient Delivery Network from Network Optimization to Smarter Network Decisions, hosted in association with PTV Logistics. Great to have you with us today. Now, for a long time, network design was a big, occasional strategic exercise, not always easy, but conditions have changed, margins have tightened, volumes are harder to predict, and disruption is now, well, it happens every day of the week, doesn't it? So how do logistics leaders like you move from periodic planning to something a bit more continuous? Before we dive into it, I can just see we have lots of people joining from around the world, from the UK, Europe, the Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland, Germany, and a few from further afield, including the US and Middle East. Welcome. And we have people from carriers including Royal Mail, GLS, retailers like Zalando and Marks and Spencer, lots of tech companies. So the perspectives in the chat should be really interesting. We want you to let us know what you think throughout our discussion while we're live from right now, if you can. If you have any questions for our panel or experiences you'd like to share over the next half an hour or so, just use the question section, which is on the right-hand side of this screen, and send us your questions as we speak. But first, we're joined by a wonderful set of three panelists. Let's meet them. First of all, we have Tim Rudolph. Tim, great to have you here. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Lindley. My name's Tim. What I do, I have a lot of parcel experience from tech, product, operations, strategy, and commercial. I worked at Hermes, Seven Senders, and DPD, and look forward to our discussion today.
We do too. Thanks for joining us, Tim. Next up, we have Amit Samani. Amit, over to you.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you're from. I'm Amit. I lead Wayfair's global middle mile and last mile network. So my work sits at the intersection of carrier strategy, network design, operational performance across EU and global markets. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. And thirdly, we have Dr. Anne de Wisperare. Great to have you with us. Tell us who you are, what you do.
Thank you, Lindley. I'm Anne. 20 plus years experience in optimization, from modeling myself through my PhD in mathematics to creating some tactical strategical tools in a supply chain consulting firm. And I founded Conunda, which was a route optimization company where they actually banned me from modeling to merging with PTV Logistics, where I'm currently driving innovation to make more global impact in logistics intelligence.
Brilliant. Thanks, Anne. Sounds like we need to hear a special story from you later on. Maybe we'll get round to it. But lovely to have you all with us, and lovely to have you wherever you are in the world with us too. And do get in touch. Use that question section on the right-hand side of the screen while we're live, and we'll get to your questions on the air. And we'll do that from a few minutes' time. So if you have a question, early question, let us know what it is. Okay, let's start with the pressures driving the shift in services to continuous network planning and much more besides, because obviously that pressure isn't coming from just one place at just one time. So Tim, first of all, how's your approach to network planning changed, and why for you isn't periodic planning working anymore?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's worth mentioning that that it's a fact, that like continuous planning really is what you do today. I don't know if there are some people who kind of try to do it in this like 2 or 3 years way. I really believe that the point a lot of changes happen gradually. I think with this change it was different. If you need a point in time what really changed, it was COVID. I think everyone remembers how this kind of kicked in, and first of all, like, parcels disappeared, there were no parcels left, volumes went down, and all of a sudden a couple of months later just the exact opposite happened, and parcels flooded everything. And my perception is over time this never really stabilized again. So there are different events coming from different sources affecting different parts of your network, your customers, your suppliers, and so on. So yeah, definitely a fact that is the case. How do we approach it? I believe it's a continuous, it's a strength, it's a capability you need. It's a continuous management capability, and you really need to be strong at it, both to cope with, unexpected situations, but also to achieve good, costs, customer convenience in different situations like peak businesses. So yeah, really, really constant challenge, and thing you need to be good at.
The intensity has grown. Before we came on today, and I won't mention any names, but before we came on today, we talked about the shock of COVID and how some delivery companies needed to almost double the amount of deliveries that they had to make. And also certain things, we remember the toilet roll crisis where we couldn't get a toilet roll. How did you stock up and how did you make those available? So those shocks can't be dealt with by a periodic Black Friday assessment. You need to do much more than that. And we'll get into this. But Amit, great to have you with us. Which indicators or signs do you think are the most trustworthy to work out where the pressures are, where the pressure is really?
Okay. So first of all, not all signals are equal. And the ones that matter to me are leading but not lagging. So the three that I trust the most, the first is your carrier tender acceptance rate. Before, that's your earliest warning. It tells your capacity is tightening before the service data shows it. The second is transit time variance by lane. And I mean variance, not average. Average masks the tail. So a lane with high variance is a future service failure waiting to happen. And the third is injection point utilization in middle mile, where consolidation hubs approach ceiling. You have days, not weeks, to reroute before the cascade downstreams. And on acting speed, the bottlenecks are rarely the data. It's basically the decision-making authority in your team who can retender, who can redirect volume, and escalate a carrier issue. So that's where most operators lose the window.
Yeah, and the variance is interesting because the variance will show you the level of the shock, the potential shock that you are experiencing from day to day. So that's clearly got to be a very clear indicator. But you mentioned the D word, data, and we need to, and we'll come into a question shortly specifically to you. But it's important to do two things: to get your data right, but also to listen to your people to get that human intelligence right.
So yeah, we all know that trucks run on very expensive diesel currently, but logistic intelligence needs to run on data. And to be honest, most of the organizations already have that data, but what they're missing is a model that connects it properly. So the old way of doing a network design exercise was just to take a snapshot, use average volumes, average costs, some growth assumptions, run it through a strategic model, completely disconnected from operations, and then go to the operational team where they would just shoot it down because you missed this, you missed that, which is completely frustrating for both sides of the table. So what needs to change and changed in the last few months or years is that strategic and operational thinking needs to happen in the same technology, so in the same model and not sequentially. I've always been a firm believer that network design needs to include all of the operational constraints. So the feedback from the drivers, the actual time I know is the real traffic, anything, not averages and assumptions.
Yeah. One thing we spoke about again before we came on was how big a job it is to audit yourself and to go through these big projects where you review your network and so on. How do we think differently, and particularly, I guess, using data, how do we think differently and help ourselves to deal with smaller problems more often rather than a huge problem twice a year?
I think it begins with having the technology being able to deal with these vast amounts of data and to be able to answer to those kind of questions more rapidly than it used to be. So you can't do these kind of exercises if it takes you weeks or months to get an answer. But the technology that is available right now, you can get answers to growth scenarios, peak moments, or how to deal or what the changes in your network will be if something happens in a couple of hours or a simple analysis. So I think it's mostly about that, changing technology.
Great, and I'm sure you guys agree as well, Tim and Amit. But let's go to an audience question now. We haven't seen these questions yet, but you've been very kind to send them in straight away, which is fantastic. So let's have a look. Now, I've got one here, which looks really interesting from Tim Sig. Thank you, Tim, from InPost. Now, I'll try and get these answered. We'll try and answer this, but of course we haven't seen them yet. Let's see how we get on. The question is, if you rebound 12 to 18 months, what's one assumption you made about your network that you know now was wrong? Now, making assumptions is sometimes the only way to plan ahead, isn't it? You kind of have to plan ahead. But I wonder, what big assumption in your network have you noticed was the wrong assumption? I'm going to throw that to... Now, Tim, I can see you thinking really hard about this. I suppose, the bigger the assumption, the bigger chance in some ways that it will fail. But what do you think on that one, Tim?
Yeah, I'm thinking which one to choose. there are plenty. No, just kidding. I think one thing I was the parcel in the carrier market. So one key assumption we spend a lot of time thinking about is whether shops would actually at some point really offer the opportunity to choose the carrier to their customers, right? And we kind of anticipated and kind of expected this to happen for a long time. And you still see, if you use the big platforms, most of the time they select the carrier for you, right?
Yeah.
So that was a big assumption, but maybe I can take the opportunity to add some more wisdom, let's say. One thing we've changed over time, because those single assumptions are very, risky if you kind of base your planning on single assumptions. I said it before. One thing how we changed midterm planning is that we don't try to optimize for one future, so one set of assumptions. We look at different set of assumptions, so particularly like different futures, and then we try to select the scenario which kind of performs well against most of the likely scenarios. And that kind of protects you to fall for one assumption in a lot of cases, not in all of them, but maybe that's helpful too.
That's really good. And Tim's question was really good there. I will just throw it to Amit briefly as well. And later on, if you want to throw in any assumptions that we can get rid of, that's great. But Amit, any thoughts from you in terms of, big assumptions that really perhaps are not well placed, particularly if you're reviewing your network really often?
So, okay, there are a couple of different ways to look at this. Our supply chains have become so much more global now that you can't plan for geopolitical tension and situations that all of us got to see a few months back and probably a year back as well, without getting into details. So I think some of the assumptions which were not considering this geopolitical tension and situation has made a significant demand on us to review our network and network strategy to be optimized for the current situation. And the real problem is, while we can do all of this, we all are resource constrained at this moment. And how do we optimize with the existing resources to keep on reviewing this network structure in today's world is what is most relevant or is changing.
In some ways, it throws out that question, is it right to optimize for efficiency? Is it right to optimize for resilience, for building resilience? Is it right to, the way we optimize, Amit, is that in need of change in order to go from this kind of semi-regular review of our routes and our network?
Promise that you're making to the customer and cost to serve, not just unit cost. So a network which is kind of built around these promises will probably be far more resilient and work. Given we all are in operations, things will go wrong. And I think the beauty of it is, once they go wrong, how gracefully you can rebound and keep the customer's trust with you. Getting back to the network question, so decision intelligence changes this, and you have to run your networks more dynamically than your annual planning cycles.
Brilliant. And I'm going to throw it to you for a second as well, because I'm assuming that this can all be helped when you get your systems right and when you start to understand the data that you're getting in, because the data is there, whether it's human, whether it's actually, technical data that you're getting through all the time in terms of delivery, successes and failures. So is all this going to help us to stop with the assumptions and to optimize better?
Well, data is only data if you don't do anything with it, of course. And so I guess the whole point is capture the data and learn from it. And also the way that I would look at those kind of exercises is you need to stress test them with historical the operational data of a longer period, and not ask the question, well, what will happen if I change this in my network, but what would have happened on the data of last month if I would have done that change, and really stress test it like that with the right systems.
Yeah.
How I look at those kind of things.
Very good. Yeah, absolutely. Insight. I mean, there's no point having data if you're not using it very, very well. So absolutely. Well, talking about stress testing, Tim, how do you do it? How do you stress test your network? If you ask the average driver, Tim, I'm sure they would say every day is a stress test. But on a bigger scale, how do you stress test and find those weak spots?
Maybe in my heart, I'm also a driver to some extent, because if you work in parcel delivery, you're fortunate enough to get stress tested at least once a year, whether you like it or not. I guess in the parcel business, you do have those due to the heavy seasonality. You do have those occasions. The organization usually is prepared for it. I think and I like to concur a little bit with what Anne said before. I think what's really important is that you learn to work with data, that you kind of collect it, that you look at it, and that you make sense out of it, even in non-peak situations. So you kind of need to establish that, and you need to understand when situations are changing. And the really key point here, from my point of view, that's not a pure headquarter job. That's a job that needs to happen on the shop floor, and so on and so on. And that's really key. And that's, if you learn to work with early indicators on the shop floor, that's like where you kind of really gain, ability to deal with unforeseen situations.
I was about to say, because if you're going to, like all organizations and businesses have to do, if you're going to make use of that data, really good use of that data, you really have to think about how it appears in the real world, how it's going to be used, how it's going to improve what you do today, tomorrow, next day. So I suppose that, do you, just in brief, Tim, do you think you have to really prioritize the delivery bit and the feedback bit rather than thinking about it as an operational procedure?
I think so. I mean, we're talking about resilience, and resilience basically requires ability to adjust. And if you think in processes and so on, they are usually stable. They are stable. They are usually optimized. I think adjustment is really important, and adjustment is a capability you need to have, everywhere. And ideally, you adjust by data rather than by gut feeling. And thus, I believe it's really important to to do it everywhere.
And I mean, I saw you behind the scenes nodding. So you agree with that? Anything that we should really be focusing on, to in order to make all of this information that we're getting through really work for us?
Absolutely no. I completely agree with Tim. One thing to add here: we make this adjustment not based on isolation, but there's a German word called Gestalt, which really means like look at it as whole picture. So you don't hear a song like separate music notes, or you don't look at a painting just as strokes of brush, right?
Yeah.
So you have to look at it holistically, and then kind of make those decisions, and those adjustments then work towards the larger goal.
Very good. Yeah, Gestalt's a very good word. And look, certain operational frictions, problems happen again and again and again, and you can recognize those patterns. You know what they are. You know the way people will react to them. How can decision intelligence start to make a change so that actually these frictions become much more fluid, much less of a problem?
Mm-hmm. So, first of all, the recurrence happens because organizations typically treat them as an execution problem rather than a learning problem. One of my favorite sayings is that, your plan is only as good as the closer it is to the execution of that plan. So if there is a big gap between the plan and execution, then probably something is wrong with your plan. If a driver is consistently changing the sequence of the trips that he's getting, or is systematically late at certain stops, then that's not noise, that's a signal. So you need to, it's not typically they say, it's Paul and he's always doing that and it's his fault. While it's actually probably there's a reason for that. And the system needs to, first of all, capture it, and secondly, learn from it. So, and the learning part is then adjusting or suggesting changes to the master data. First place, maybe time windows are not right in the system, service times are not correct, and then perhaps on an even higher level, questioning whether the goal of the optimization itself is still making sense. So, are you still optimizing to the right goal, to the right intent of the planner, the driver, the company? Are we still in line with what we're really trying to do? So, and there a system can really work. So again, it starts with capturing the data. So if you don't measure how your driver is doing his deliveries, then you can't see that he's resequencing. But secondly, learning from it and then automatically adapting to it.
Yeah, bless Paul. Paul has been working very, very hard, and so we really need to give him a bit of a hand. Well, listen, partnership is part of this as well, and we're 20 minutes in, so we'll come to your questions very shortly. But Tim, look, it is very important to work with the right people, to have partners that are also part of this new system, part of this more fluid way of working where data's being used well. What do you need from your partners, your tech partners in particular?
I think I think it's a little bit hard sometimes for in particular technology partners, because you sell to some buying center in the headquarter, and then you usually come up with like nice dashboards, but the value really is created, as I said before, on the shop floor, with a van driver, and you have a different target group, and I really want to encourage those technology partner really to think about their whom they are addressing, and address them in the right way. It might be different language, might be way easier, way of presenting data, might be really focused on what's key. Would probably not be a dashboard, and kind of adapting, being empathetic to the person you're actually, where you try to create value. I think that's really key. I see way too often that you get dashboards that are prepared for some analysts in some headquarter, and I just don't think that really creates value. So really try to understand where value can be created, and try to come up with a solution that really works and really creates value there with the person that is actually supposed to use it.
And it needs such a good conversation. This is one of the things in partnership that is absolutely essential, but often doesn't happen, is that really, really honest conversation, of fluidity of information that your partner and that and you can be honest with each other. That's really important. I mean, what do you think about that too? Anything in terms of that technological relationship that could be better?
So 3 things. The first thing, building up on what Anne and Tim were already saying, this has to be integrated into the workflow. The tools that create value should sit inside the operational process and not alongside it. So if a planner has to leave the environment to use your tool, you already lost half the battle and most of the adoption. So it should be in the workflow, number 1. Number 2 is granularity and transparency. Like, you need carrier and lane level details, but you need to also understand why the model is recommending you a specific route. It cannot be a black box. If it's a black box, it will erode trust, and very fast in a very operational world. Therefore, granularity and transparency both will go hand in hand. And the third, mostly for our technology partners, the iteration speed. We've talked a lot about how networks are changing constantly, and we cannot wait for 6 months every time we come with a tech requirement change to you, saying it's on the roadmap, and get it to us 6 months from now. So we need it in weeks and probably months, and not 6 months. Maybe it's a little bit of a friction point, but that's what we need.
I don't have a roadmap. So you can come to me. You have it in a few weeks, no problem. If it's important enough.
It sounds like it. It really sounds like it is. Well, listen, it's been great so far, and we have a few minutes left, and we have your audience questions to go through now. So let's look at what you've been writing into us. And if you have a question, we have 7 minutes left, so you can still ask your questions, and we'd love to hear from you. Just on the right hand side of the screen, let's go to Francesco Tribuni from Block.it. How would you? We haven't seen these questions again, but let's give them a go. How would you plan a network redesign if you're looking to achieve a massive shift of parcel volumes from D2D to lockers and parcel shops only? That's a very specific question, but probably quite important. I may have to get people's hands up for this one. The behind the scene is huge. Cap expenditure, new shipping rates, new operational models. So how do you do a redesign from parcel to D2D or lockers? Any thoughts on that one? Any hands up? It's a tough one, isn't it? Any thoughts? Yeah, Tim, please.
I think I can reply to that. Yeah, well, I think I would love, in particular in the German market, if kind of the share of parcels going to lockers and shops would really pick up. I think there are in this case there are way more mature markets, and actually it makes life a lot easier for parcel carriers if that's possible. Makes it more convenient for a lot of customers who are kind of open to those solutions. And again, I'm going back to the original questions. Network design would be way easier if you could really just work with pickup and drop-off points, because you get consolidated delivery and pickup, and that's super valuable. So yeah, it would be great.
And again, some countries have adopted very widely, but of course certain countries haven't. We have them in the UK, but not that many of them. And of course the location of those drop-off points, for example, is very important. Anne, were you about to say something there?
Well, how I would solve it is by modeling it and simulating it. So you have the volumes, and it's all about then rerouting them to those lockers. all addresses at a certain region go to locker A, others go to locker B. Maybe the ones in between can choose. You need a model who is able to optimize it, and I would simulate it and then see.
Yeah.
So any network design I typically now do with tools that we have available.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, let's go to another question. Let's see how we get on with this one. This is Thomas Day. Thanks, Thomas, from the US Postal Regulatory Commission. Wow. Thank you for writing your question in. Okay, let's see how we get on with this one. When considering fundamental modeling technique, dynamic versus stochastic, which method would you recommend? In what circumstances would you use a delivery in a delivery network? So, and I'm going to throw that to you, even though it's quite a tough question, actually. I wonder what you think about that in terms of the modeling technique.
Yeah, it is a difficult question.
It's a big
I'm
one,
not 100% sure that I understand correctly. So could you repeat it again? So what's the difference between the two options?
Well, it's interesting. Thanks very much for your question, Thomas, but I'm going to have to look up the stochastic method as well, because actually it's quite an interesting word to use there. Maybe it's not one that everyone's familiar with. When considering fundamental modeling techniques, dynamic versus stochastic, which method would you recommend, and in what circumstances would you use that, though, whichever choice you have in a delivery network?
Well, in any case, the dynamic re-optimization or optimization is being used when typically you have some deliveries you need to do and you don't know what is coming back. So the outbound is known, but the inbound is not known. Then typically you are doing a dynamic optimization. But that's actually the best that I can do for now on this question.
I think it might be, just looking this up, it may be just something much more, Thomas, that you work on about the assumptions and the predictions that you take. But hopefully some of this stuff we talked about assumptions earlier on might be useful. But thanks, Thomas. Brilliant to have a question that actually stumps us. Really good to have that. Okay, let's have another look at this one. This is from oh, great. Thomas has just followed up. Dynamic uses averages, stochastic uses variance. Thank you for that. Listen, we'll move on, but thanks, Thomas, very much for adding that to it as well. Okay, let's go to Tristan Hipper.
Maybe if I can, Lindy, one minute on that. So if that's the definition, and sorry, it's been a while.
Great, thank you.
Using those terminologies, but if you have the averages and the variance, then you should always use both. And because then it comes down to using variance pooling and making sure that something with a big variance and little variance is actually combined. It's actually used in sectorization, parcel sectorization, and so on.
Yeah, and I think Amit earlier on said about the importance of variance as an indicator is very, very, very big there. So to get together is the answer. Thank you, Thomas. You may disagree, but that's all very good. Thanks for the question. We've got time for maybe just one more very quickly. Tristan Hipper, is there a minimum data maturity level that an organization needs before continuous network intelligence is viable? Is there a minimum data maturity? Amit, do you get that? In terms of how long, I think Anne mentioned earlier on, longer forecasts, longer modeling is very, very useful. What do you think, Amit?
So I think the answer would change from organization to organization because each one's data maturity level is very different. I would rather, flip it around and say, sooner you get on the journey of that, better it is, because when you're on the journey, you will anyways improve your data maturity levels. And honestly, even if someone is doing it for the last 6, 7, 8 years, if you go and tell them, is your data all right? No, I think many of us struggle with the same problem. Data is not right, our dimensions are incorrect, etc., etc. Though we have 15, 20 years of, I'll just say, logistical experience as a network. So I'll say, get on the journey. Don't worry about your data maturity. That will improve. And this world of AI, which we didn't touch upon a lot, it keeps improving.
It may be the first data conversation that I've had in about 2 years where AI wasn't mentioned throughout. But yes, I mean, that's another dimension that really we don't have time to get into today, but because that's all we have time for. Thanks very much for being with us. I hope you're coming away with a clearer sense of how the shift to smarter, more continuous network decision-making is playing out, some of those key factors, what it takes to get ahead of it. But it's time to go. Do join us at the next Leaders in Logistics event in London on the 6th and 7th month of October. And there's a wealth of webinars, interviews, and reports on our website, so check those out too. But for now, a huge thank you to our brilliant panelists for a genuinely sharp, short conversation from the cutting edge, and to you for tuning in and for all your questions. Thanks very much for watching us, for joining us. Till next time, take care. See you.